Okay, we're live, and our new intro did not go off because nothing ever works when I push these buttons. I'm Barbara Wallace. Welcome to Step in the Story. That was the whole point of our new intro, is we have a new name. We realized nothing odd other than we realized having a name for a show and a name for the community being different was confusing. So we're now Step into the Story. Like I said, I'm Barb Wallace. I'm here with my bestie, Donna Allward, the New York Times bestselling author, and between us, we've written close to 100 books. So right now, yeah, and right now, both of us are kind of into historical fiction. We're both reading it and writing it. I'm working on something set in the 60s. And what you doing, Donna?
I'm working on a book set in World War I in Nova Scotia, and set during the time of the Halifax explosion, which is not a lot of people know about it, but it was a huge munition ship exploded in the harbor and leveled the whole north end of the city and killed a couple thousand and injured thousands more. And so that's sort of the backdrop of the time setting. And then I've got two main characters, both women. One is a bluebird, so a military nurse at the time, and the other is a war widow with a small baby. And so we follow their individual sort of stories and what they're dealing with, and then their lives sort of intersect in a really a kind of a devastating way. About 2/3 of the way through the book, and then that has to all get resolved. So I'm probably getting close to 2/3 of the way through, I guess, and hoping to finish it soon. I know where everything's supposed to go, so as long as it goes well, I just keep moving from one scene to the next. So, and I'm not a plotter, so that's a big thing for me. So that's what I'm working on.
Okay, and we have a guest. I'm going to pronounce her name right. This is Lindsey Mugeraur.
Yep.
All right, from Lindsay's Little Library. And Lindsay is a book-loving, coffee-drinking mom of 3 from Wisconsin. Go Packers. Reading has always been a part of her life, from Judy Blume to R.L. Stine to waiting for her Hogwarts letter.
Same.
5 years ago, she set a goal to start her own book-focused YouTube channel to share some of her favorite reads with anyone who would listen. And you have like 7,000 subscribers now?
Yeah. I didn't think 7 people would listen to me.
That is amazing. You're going to have to talk to us offline.
Yeah, I was like, girl, we need to talk.
All right. So her experience has also led her to create 2 local book clubs, volunteer on her local library's board of trustees, God love you, and open an Etsy shop selling book sleeves.
Yes, I did.
It's been a wild ride, but she loves turning every page. So what we'll do is make sure we post the links to everything, your channel, your Instagram, and your Etsy shop. The book sleeves are really pretty.
Oh, and I have like piles. I've got all the fall vibes going on right now. So.
All right. So we'll make sure we put all of those up on the community page so people can find you. And so you can have, 7,001 subscribers.
Sweet. Love it.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we dive right in?
All right. So tonight we're talking about Dear Mrs. Bird by AJ Pearce. It's described as an irresistible debut set in London during World War II about an adventurous young woman who becomes a secret advice columnist. It's a warm, funny, and enormously moving story for fans of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society and Lilac Girls. So what made you pick this book, Lindsay? Because you were the one that suggested this one to us.
Which, first of all, to pick a book to read with you guys was like, that was pressure. I still have the stack sitting here. I had like 7 books, and I'm like, I don't know. Can we read them all together? It'd be great.
We would have.
Hey, listen, you are free to post recs in the comments
anytime.
No problem.
We'll do. But this one has been, I don't know if it happens to you guys, but you hear about a book and then all of a sudden you see it somewhere else, and then someone else is talking about it, and then I don't know. This one has just been smacking me in the face for a while, and I was just like, well, let's do it. Plus, it was a little shorter than the other ones. To be honest, 3 kids, remember 3.
Sure. And honestly, I'm kind of the same way in that, like when Barb said that you picked it, I was like, yay, because I used to work at Indigo and I remember it coming in and like just seeing the cover over and over again and just thinking, So I was like, oh, cool. And I really didn't know much about it. So when you said, like, when she said you picked it, I was really excited. And it has like a ton of reviews, like 4,000 4 and 5 star reviews. And I guess she wrote a sequel, yes?
I believe so.
She did. It's called Fondly Yours, or
yeah, so
it's actually right on the cover.
Oh, Yours Cheerfully.
Yours Cheerfully.
Yours Cheerfully, that's it. That's it.
Oh, and there's more women with their backs to us. That's great.
Well, yes. I mean, come on, you have to stay on brand now. So I guess at this point, we should just give a brief little, what we thought of the book, kind of general thing. So I'll let you go first because you're our guest.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I loved this from the very beginning. I think I had a British accent going on in my head the entire time that I was reading this. I thought it was because there are so many different options out there that take place in London at this time, right? Tons of them. But I thought it was unique to the point of it gave me more of the like everyday normalcy that was happening at the time. At times I'm like, Emmy, do you even know there's a war going on? Like, you're worried about what dress you're gonna like. It just gave us a little bit of a different viewpoint as she's trying to walk to work around huge holes that just appeared overnight because they were raided, yet she's worrying about her best friend. I thought it was just a really unique perspective. I loved so much about it. I need more. In fact, I already ordered the second book.
Oh, there you go. That's already a compliment.
That's every author's like dream.
Yeah.
What about you, Barb?
I'm kind of the same way. I was right before the show started. I was telling Donna I was really happy to read a book about World War II that had nothing to do with the resistance or the Holocaust. It's not that I don't enjoy reading some of those books, but it was refreshing to have a lighter read. I confess, when I first started it, Emmy just was bugging me because she seemed so young. But then I realized that was that's the voice of a 22-year-old. And then I realized, like, okay, no, AJ Pearce is just really doing this really well and writing what a 22-year-old sounds like. And it sounds young to me because I'm older than 22.
A year or two.
Right, yeah. Once I got past that, I was like, oh, well, actually now I can really get into it and like her, because now I can get why she's making some of these decisions. Because sometimes you're like, gosh, you're so naive. Right. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, you're only 22, of course. Yeah. And the same thing, I liked how normal it was. Like the British really do stiff upper lip better than anybody.
Yeah. Or at one point she referenced it as being British brave. I'm like, whoa, that is totally yes.
Yeah. And I found it a really nice change of pace too, because we have been reading books that are just a little more intense and a little more sort of action oriented and about like someone's actions changing the face of the war and sort of being in the thick of it. So this was a little bit different with her being in London during the Blitz. And I, like you said, Lindsay, it's a little more slice of life, which I really enjoyed. And it was funny. Oh. And so I remember saying to Barb as I started it, like, I'll warn you, it's a little bit fluffy. And then, I got to, well, we all know that there's a point that you get to in the book. And then I think I cried 3 times after that. And so for me, it was that whole first section just made me fall in love with Emmy. Mm-hmm. And then because I was so invested, when things went sideways, I was just devastated for her. So I mean, I loved it. It was really great.
I did get a little mad at AJ at one point. I'm like, you made me fall in love with her, and what?
Yeah, exactly. So the premise of the book sort of hinges on her pretending to be somebody else, which is her boss, Mrs. Bird, who's an advice columnist.
Oh, who did you picture as Mrs. Bird? Like, did you have like a?
Yes, I did. So have you watched Call the Midwife?
No, not yet. It's on my list.
Okay, so there's a secretary that works for Dr. Turner, and she always looks a little bit sour, but she's really lovely. But that's kind of who I pictured as Mrs. Bird, only a little more blustery.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so
And then
I pictured like a Kathy Bates with reddish hair.
And I also pictured, okay, so clearly I'm at like a Masterpiece PBS kind of junkie, but if you've watched Home Fires, I think Home Fires, there is a British officer, and he's also in, oh my gosh, there's a series on, okay, it's on PBS. Anyway, he plays a British officer, and he's very dashing, and that's kind of who I pictured as Charles.
Oh yeah.
So I did actually have some people in my mind when I was, reading along. When it came to Emmy impersonating Mrs. Bird, because that's sort of the premise of the whole thing, did you think that was that the author sort of rationalized why she did that enough? Like, did it make sense why she would step in and do that?
I think so. I don't think Emmy could help herself.
Yeah. It was done gradually enough that it worked. Like, she didn't just plow right in, which was good.
No, she considered that, this was, I think she got frustrated.
Yeah.
And the more it went on, and then, like there were these letters coming in that were so heartfelt and had legitimate questions and
I
problems.
think she could identify with.
Yeah, but they were all inappropriate and not allowed to be, she wasn't allowed to help those people. And I think you're right. I think she just couldn't help herself, because even when Bunty found out, she was like, you have to stop doing that. And she's like, okay. And then she didn't.
Did it again.
Do you think it was because, I'm sorry, do you think it's because that is one thing she could influence and have control over when she's surrounded by so much that she couldn't?
Yeah, because that wasn't the job that she expected either, right? When she went there. And yeah, I think you're right.
The only thing that I had any kind of criticism about was she has a friend that she talks about, her friend Kitty. The Kitty or Kelly? Kitty.
Yeah.
And twice she's used as a very important in a plot point. Like at one point, it's what helps write the letters, and then later on they bring it up as it's an example of her pushiness. But all of it happened off screen. I would have liked to have seen her briefly just to be reminded of her as a real person, because it came out of again, the woman's like, well, you did this to Kitty. And I'm like, well, we didn't see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but it also makes me wonder if she wrote it and it got edited out too.
Good point. It's possible.
Because it was odd that it wasn't mentioned and it played an important role. And I'm like, I wonder if she did have something in there. And then the editor's like, oh, no, cut it, because we need to do it this way or something.
Yeah, and there was just one section for me that was a little bit slow, and I'm not sure it was necessary. And it was when things go really sideways for her and she's really struggling. She goes home to her parents, and it's more of a slow section where I think that could have happened still in London, or it could have been shorter, or it just felt a little off pace for me. And I was like, okay, let's go in and get back to where we're supposed to be. So, but honestly, that's like when I was thinking about, is there anything I didn't like about this book? I had to really search and think about anything that maybe, and it was just sort of the pacing of that section, which is it's a pretty minor detail, really.
Well, sticking with the reviews though, yes, it had like 4,000 or 5,000 4 and 5 star reviews, but it did have it was one of those books that you either got 1 or 2 or 4 and 5, which happens when you have a strong voice. So she did have her detractors, and I went and read the negative ones because I tend to look and see what the 2-star reviews say. And the same thing, it seemed to have the same complaint, which was they didn't think Emily grew at all over the course of the book. She didn't really she was still the same person at the end of the book that she was in the first. So do you think, my question is, do you think that's true? Do you think she grew? Or do you think that she's still going to play stagnant? I mean, it's a series, so you can't have her growing too much because she's got to grow more in the second book.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Just knowing it was a series, I wasn't expecting huge growth.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think about first books in a series as more of a get to know you. Like, yeah, there's going to be a story behind it, but I'm really here just to get to know who you are and what's going on. And then there's the part of me that's like, knowing the hardship we went through, how does she not grow?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I thought she did grow a little.
Yeah.
She did get off, I think, a little easy. I was surprised at how easy she got off with some of the stuff.
Way too easy.
Yeah, and like how it sort of like suddenly people appear and clear her name kind of thing. But it
was also dramatic, so I loved it. That was there.
Yeah, it was.
Right.
And I mean, I think she did learn a little bit because it was what happened to her was personal. When everything went sideways, it affected her personally. So I think that there was growth. You can't help it. You're right.
Yeah, and I think the distinction between growth with what happened at her job and growth with what happened with her personal relationships are two very different things. And yeah, she got off a little easy in the job part. But the story really, for me, was really about how that affected her personal relationships with Bunty and with Bill and with Charles. And so for me, I had no problem with her growth arc because I felt like after everything that had happened, and I mean, she was forced to grow up. And so, and let's face it, she's growing up, but she's still only, you know, in her early 20s. It's not like, you know, she was suddenly thinking like a 30-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, she's still age appropriate. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I felt like there was a gravity to her at the end that she didn't have in the beginning. And so I had zero problem with that.
I wonder if it's because this was really meant for more of a younger audience. I think that was another one of the complaints. Yeah. Is that they thought it was more of a young adult book than a adult book. And I'm wondering if those are the people who are, you know, around my age, where they're, again, like I said, I figured out it was the woman's voice being 22, but if they're reading it going, you know, applying a 50 or a 60-year-old mentality, that they might have problems with it. So that's what I'm wondering. I would wholeheartedly recommend this for a high schooler to read, or, you know, and like if you're looking for something your high school or college kid, I'd say definitely read this, because they'd really get it.
I don't know. I don't really think it matters so much about the age as much as what kind of tone you like as a reader. Like, because I don't know, maybe because my kids are the same age as Emmy, but you know, I really don't read a lot of YA. I will now and again. And it didn't even cross my mind that this would be more YA sort of stuff, but it did cross my mind that this is a lighter read. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like a lighter read with, like, there was a good amount of humor in this. Like, I found myself laughing a couple of times. So if you know, that's not the kind of thing you're into, then this probably isn't for you. But I mean, that didn't really cross my mind at all. Of course, I didn't go and read the reviews either.
No, so, that's the thing with me. I always end up doing it.
Well, I might have if I hadn't been on vacation and ignoring everything.
I can't believe you did that.
I know. I can't believe you didn't pay attention to our show while you were on.
I know, and I didn't take my laptop and work while I was away. Nope. So she says in the author's note at the back that this is based on real life advice columns in magazines during the war. And so let's talk for a second about how different the advice is that Mrs. Bird gives and that Emmy gives, And and was it realistic? Like both styles of advice. And did you like Emmy's advice that she ended up writing back? Go, Lindsay.
Oh.
Put you on the hot seat.
The entire time I am picturing Mrs. Bird as like the principal from Matilda from the movie as
yeah,
like, but in nicer clothes. Like, so I just see her as this like just no nonsense, suck it up and move on. That's that's just what we do. We suck it up and move on. And then I was starting to think towards the end of the book about Emmy just gave out advice without really necessarily thinking that it was going to hit somebody else differently than what she intended. And
yes,
I think from Mrs. Bird's perspective, this is I don't want to say political. We need to make sure we toe the line.
Yep.
And not bring in anything that could be deemed inappropriate or that could potentially be challenged. So I'm just going to give out this blatant advice time and time again and ignore all these other people that really do need help and just talk to the ones that seem surface level.
Well, plus don't they say that she'd been writing the columns since before World War I or something like that? So she was Edwardian. And so a lot of her viewpoints were too, like women didn't kiss, women didn't show ankles. I mean, when you think of it in that way, you're like, well, yeah, when she started writing, women were wearing long dresses. And now they're driving and holding jobs and sleeping with people who aren't their husbands.
Which then makes me think of today and some of the status quo things that some people deem inappropriate that now is like, wait a second, no.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy how a book can then talk to me from today's perspective of.
That's a good point.
I was told, what did my 13-year-old say to me? That's the kind of advice I expect for someone born in the 1900s.
That's funny.
So
that hurt.
Really hurt a little bit.
Honestly, I was sitting here thinking, and I should have done it earlier. I was thinking, and you probably saw my eyes going around. I was trying to find a picture of the secretary from Call the Midwife, and then I found it, and then I downloaded it, and then I realized I'm not running the conversation, so I couldn't upload it. So I was going to send it to Barb, and then I clued into the fact that it needs to be a PDF. And so I don't have it, but I'll post it in the comments. But when you were saying that sort of like British stiff upper lip, that was like, I got to find a picture. So I am going to post it in the comments after.
And not every book does this to me where I have a specific, and maybe it was the way it was described, because sometimes as I'm going through, I'm just reading. And
I'll tell you who else I thought about as casting for her. Okay, and I know Barb will know this reference because it's from Downton Abbey. Oh, okay. And it actually is the Mrs. Bird from Downton Abbey, the cook that comes and takes on Mrs. Patmore.
Oh,
do you remember Barb? Yeah, and so she's very no nonsense, brusque kind of. So I thought of her too. So I thought Mrs. Bird's advice was very typical for her generation. And I found Emmy's very practical and caring, although perhaps a bit naive. So yeah, I think it was, I didn't find it out of place, I guess.
No.
It suited each character, I think.
Well, and it also defined though that there was such a difference between what one would say versus what the other would say. It was like polar opposites.
And yet she tried to copy the style, which was really neat. Like she tried to copy Mrs. Bird's style, which,
you know what else AJ Pearce did, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, which was really smart, is, so Mrs. Bird was not the most sympathetic advice columnist. I'm sorry you got yourself in that manner, but oh well, that's what you get for sinning kind of thing. But she had her volunteering for every possible war thing on the home front because she was always out taking care of somebody. So even though she was very harsh, she balanced it by making her do really nice things elsewhere. So you didn't think, oh my God, what a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Right, she had a good heart.
She was like, I gotta go rescue a cat. There's miners stuck. I've got to go dig them out. She was just
she had her causes, right?
Did a lot of causes, and she was so matter of fact about those too. But because she had causes, you realized she was a decent human being. That's just what she was. Like, oh, now we must go dig the miners out. Excuse me, and off she went.
And you know what? If you were in a pickle, wouldn't you want to have Mrs. Bird on your side? Right?
Everyone needs a Mrs. Bird. I
hope you can all use one.
I think she should show back up in the sequel to give Emmy some advice.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think she's got some stuff.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to order it.
I know.
Of course we are.
We all have that same problem, and it's okay.
Book mail just came today.
Me too.
And that wasn't it.
Tomorrow. Go to the bookstore tomorrow. Oh, okay, and the cat has arrived. It shows up every show. So, all right, final question then. Why do you think Lindsay said that when she first saw this book, there was one of these books that she read about it, she saw it, it was like all over the place. It's like every time you logged on. Why do you think it got so much buzz when it came out? Because it's a British book that came over here.
I'm gonna hold it up so that
okay.
I'm trying to turn it the right way, and
mine is different.
Oh, you do? Yeah, they are two different covers.
Right. Well, I would say that mine is probably a Canadian version.
Don't get the same cover. I think actually I think Lindsay's is your hardcover?
Mine's a hardcover.
That's why. And this is the paperback.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so which one do we like better, the blue or the yellow?
That's a good
question. I like the blue.
I don't know. Mine has a typewriter on the back.
Oh.
Mine does not.
No, mine has London in the Fog.
I will say, I think I like the yellow, but I think I like the women better.
I like the women walking away from the camera.
Yeah, better than the drawing. Like, I think I like the picture of the women better than the drawing, but I like the yellow. The yellow stands out.
And I love this.
I do too. I do too.
Me too. And so I think it was the cover for me, and also that it was, and so I think that probably helps, because I think it's probably one of those ones where, since it did get so many reviews, if you start getting good word of mouth, then people start picking it up, and then it just sort of picks up steam. So, Barb, what are your thoughts? You always have some really interesting thoughts about buzz.
No, what? I think
smart.
I think you actually. The other thing is we've covered it now numerous times, was that it was not resistance and it was not the Holocaust, and I think that every once in a while you want a palate cleanser, and for people who like World War II, want to read something just kind of different. And I think that's a lot of the buzz was, it was like you said, it was light, it was funny, it was fluffy, and it was something you hadn't read.
I can totally see this as like a PBS sort of either mini series or 2-hour like special or whatever, right? Like, I could see them picking this up. And
now, had you heard stuff about it too, Lindsay, or just seen the cover?
I have heard stuff about it. So there are 3 other booktubers that I converse with on a regular basis. And so Krista is one of them. And she was talking about it and saying that basically, like, you need to read this book. This is for you. And then I was on Instagram and came across the recommendation. And then I was at book club and somebody mentioned something. And that basically it's like 3 strikes. I'm like, all right, I got it. I need to pick this up. So
I'm really glad you recommended it. It was a fun
me too. And well, when Barb said it's going to be right in Donna's wheelhouse, and it was.
It is. Donna's a huge one.
And it was just what I needed to.
Yeah, it just was cozy. I need palate cleansers every so often.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was a good one, because we had just finished reading a very heavy book, which was great. It was Sister Mother Warrior by Vanessa Riley. And it was well written, but that is a heavy book.
I have to read that for book club next month.
You'll love it. She's such a marvelous writer.
She's such a strong writer. But very different, and definitely not a fun, romp during the
It sounds very,
right.
yeah.
So,
And next month we're doing Joan by Catherine Chen, which is the story of Joan of Arc, which has also gotten a lot of buzz.
Yes.
And a lot of it's got some controversy attached to it, so it should be very interesting. But between those two, this was the perfect read. So
yeah,
highly recommend. I think we all are giving it 5 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm gonna order the next one. And that's the true test, right? If you finish something and you go order the next book.
That's it. Now AJ Pearce has got 3 more sales.
And then that's how autobuys are born. So, all right. What are we doing next month, Barb?
Oh, well, I said we were doing Joan. But
right. Right. With Sydney, right?
Right. Sydney Young from HF Chit Chat.
Right.
It's a hashtag on Twitter. But it's which stands for Historical Fiction Chit Chat. And it's the go-to place. It's a conversation they have every week. She hosts it along with 3 other women, and it's every historical writer and agents, everybody's participates in it. So she's really got her finger on what's going on in the industry. And she picked Joan, which, like I said, it's got controversy. It's Joan of Arc, but without the religion, which will be interesting. I can see where the controversy is coming from.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it'll probably be one of those polarizing sort of love it or hate it kind of things, or love it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then before that, next Tuesday, Barb and I are starting a new feature called The Writing Room, and we're going to talk about motivation. So it's for writers and readers, really, because for writers, it'll we'll talk about what character motivation and developing your characters and that kind of thing. But for readers, it's also a chance to sort of look a little behind the scenes and see what happens in our weird and twisted minds. So it should be interesting. So it's our first one on the 27th at 7 Eastern.
Yep. We are the belief that you can have the character do anything if you give it if you give he or she the proper motivation.
Yeah.
So we're gonna show how and why and talk a little bit about that. Lindsay, we're so glad you came.
I'm so glad you invited me. This has been a blast. I feel like we could just chat books for like hours.
We could. So you'll have to come back.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you picked such a great book. So.
Yeah, I totally trust your book picks now.
Oh my goodness. Bar is so high. Oh man.
So everyone, we are going to post Lindsay's information on our community. Make sure you subscribe to Lindsay's Little Library on YouTube. It's fun. I've watched it a few times. She has good recommendations.
Thank
you. And if you want to come over while you're at YouTube and subscribe to us, that would be great. We are trying to build our subscribers slowly but surely. And other than that, we are working on some new changes we'll talk about in the upcoming months. Until then, we appreciate you and thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.